Welcome to the Friends & Co podcast. I'm Sarah, and joining me is my co-host Shira. In each episode, we delve into the daily lives, career journeys, and personal experiences of our guests, offering you an insider's view into what various jobs are really like. This episode features Tova Walden, the founder of Fringe Boutique, a modest women's clothing store based in Toronto. Tova shares her insights on what it takes to own and run a successful clothing store. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Tova Walden, how are you?
We're doing good. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for coming on. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. What does it take to open up a clothing store?
Well, it doesn't take much, let me tell you.
Wow, that's shocking.
Yeah. When I decided I was going to open up a clothing store, I was a high school teacher in Tiferes. And at that point, I was pretty stylish and people kept commenting on how nice my clothing was and where did you get it? And, asking fashion advice. And at that point in Toronto, it was really hard to access really good, modest clothing. You had to search to find it. And a lot of people were going to the US to get clothing. And I was like, okay, what the heck? Maybe I can bring it here. And it was a lot easier than I thought it would be, I just one day took the plunge and I started emailing actually companies. Hey, I'm thinking of opening up a clothing boutique in Toronto. I was starting small. Would you send me your lookbook? And surprisingly, they didn't ask me any questions. They didn't ask me for my business ID or tax numbers. They were just like, sure, we'll send it right over.
And were you calling companies that you were wearing or just that you knew of?
So some of them was just what I knew of, from modest clothing wear. And some of them were companies that were tried and true that I loved. And yeah, I just reached out to them and they all answered and they were more than willing to work with me.
So that was your first step.
That was my first step.
So before opening the store, before creating a business, before putting plans into place, you reached out to the companies and took it from there.
Yes, just to get my feet wet to see what it would entail. And to tell you the truth, I did not have a business plan. I really was doing this as an experiment. I was getting a little tired of the teaching. I love teaching and I still do, but I was getting tired of it, the generation gap, at risk of sounding very old. It was getting harder and harder to feel like I was getting through to them, to entertain them, to feel like I felt like I was competing with their phones and technology and their instant gratification. And I thought I would try something new.
So from there, you reached out to a bunch of companies. About how many companies would you say you reached out to?
I started with 5 or 4 and they answered right away and they sent me their catalogs and I started looking at it and looking at the pricing and seeing how much money I would have to invest. I had a very small space. I was starting out in a little room in my basement and I started with a pretty small investment. I had a couple $1,000s of my own. And then once I put together some orders, I realized just how much more I needed. I borrowed a little bit from a friend and I just went for it. I jumped in. I placed my first order.
Now, knowing what it entails, would you have jumped in like you jumped in before, right? You kind of do you know what I mean? Hindsight is 2020. You just kind of went with it. Now knowing everything it takes, would you still you think you would have done it?
I think I would have. You know what? Then it was the naivety and the excitement of it that really pushed me. And I'm glad I had that naivety. Had I known, to me, I thought it was as simple as buying and selling, which buying and selling really is that simple. But there's so much more to it that I had no idea about, how much paperwork it would be, how much, it would be the inventory, managing inventory, shipping costs, just the technicalities of running a store. To me, I'm hey, I'm going to buy a few cool items that I think will sell. And then I'll sell it to these people and that's all it takes, And although there's an element of that, there's just a lot more that if I had known, I probably would have been afraid. And I don't know if I would have jumped in the way I did.
And was it difficult that you were in Toronto, were companies not so willing to work with someone based in Canada, or did it make a difference to them?
They were willing. You know what? Companies, the more business for them, the better. It's mutually beneficial for them to sell me their things and for me to buy it, right? It is quite difficult to get goods over to Canada from overseas. There's duties, an 18% duty that you have to pay that's expensive. There's the dollar change that is a huge disadvantage for Canadians. And just technically getting it over the border is just so much harder.
But I do feel like you said before, perhaps like one of the advantages is like the lack of competition, right? Like I'm wondering if, a religious girl wants to open a store in the States, how many stores carry, these brands that you carry, and how does that work? Like maybe the brands have, they're only going to sell to a certain amount of stores in each, zip code or, however it works, as opposed to when you reached out to them, that was, you avoided that issue.
Absolutely. There's a lot less competition here and the need is great. So, with, supply and demand in Toronto is very simple. The demand was there, you supply it, and it worked. And it was great. I was very blessed with like people just have open arms wanting to receive the clothing I was bringing in. And yes, that was very much an advantage for sure. And it also could be a disadvantage. I just wanted to point out because sometimes I feel like I'm doing a community service. Like they need me. If I don't bring it in, who will? And although there's other stores, great stores in Toronto, they've come to rely on me, season after season to bring in like, companies for them and looks for them. And it is a community service because it's a lot of work.
And let me ask you about inventory for a second, like managing the inventory. I'm sure there's a lot of challenges with that. Like, how do you know how much to buy? Do you know what I mean? Like how to gauge what's going to be like, I know I have someone that works in a store, let's say in Lakewood, and there's someone that comes in and says, well, this color is going to sell and I need, this type of skirt. Like, how do you figure that out?
Okay. So that's a good question. First of all, you need a finger on the pulse. Like you need to be a person who has a finger on the pulse, knowing what people need and then providing it. I feel like you really need that intuitive power of seeing what's in style, even though what it's in style, does my community need that? And knowing like I learn each season, like, okay, I need more of this, less of this, right? And it's a risk. But I think we know trends, first of all, based on what people are selling, but also based on just looking at social media, looking at what and very much feedback from my customers of what they want and need.
Do you feel like a large part of your success is that intuition, or was a lot of it like learned on the job?
Both. For sure, you need a good intuitive sense and you need to be fashion forward and also deal with what the Jewish brands are making, right? Pick through it, see what you like.
You can't just be a good businesswoman.
No, although it does help to be a good businesswoman. But also, but also I'll tell you the truth. I really, really am open to feedback, what my community wants. Like, for example, right now, slip skirts and graphic tees are all the rage, right? And it's
like, who
obvious.
decided that? Who decided that? Like, are the manufacturers deciding that? Like, who decided that? So this slip skirt is now going to be in style. Is it just that that's what the companies are selling? So that's what people are buying?
This is a very good question. And I sometimes would love to know the root. Like, is it like Paris? Is it New York? Is it just what they're making?
Is it just
I have yet to figure it out.
From girls? From girl fashion?
It very much goes on trends. People are like followers. A lot of people don't know what looks good on them and they just want to go with the trends. And, but this specific trend you see in the non-Jewish world as well. Like it's an H&M and Zara and, all these like high-end brands as well are making slip skirt materials. And so we're just like getting on the train with the rest of the people. Who decides it? That's a good question. The thing is that slip skirts and slip dresses don't look good on everybody. They are very clingy and they're tough to get the exact fit around the hips. And so we have to work with the companies. It's a lot of trial and error. Which companies are good? Which ones have a better material? And I get feedback from the people and I'm in the store watching which of the companies have a better fit. What specifically will my community go for it? Right in the beginning, when I brought it in, like it started, let's say last year, my community didn't go for it. I had to like sell it on sale and then suddenly this year it's picking up. It's all the rage. And so I'm bringing more in. And that's what I mean about putting your finger on the pulse. It's really about watching the trends and seeing what's selling and you keep reassessing what you're going to bring in, which variation of it. And, it's a lot of staying vigilant.
If we could just backtrack a bit. So you said, I know we're going all the way back to the beginning, but I just want to, just get it more like clear in terms of like, financing the store initially. Can you break that down for us? Like in a more details, more numbers, what would you say somebody needs to start a store? I know you started small and you started in home and you started with a few brands. Also, you're in, Toronto, which is, not the tri-state area. So anyway, you had a smaller inventory, but what would somebody need? Let's say you brought in like 4 or 5 brands to start with, one room. What would be like an initial financial, to finance the store initially opening? And how did you do it?
Okay. That's a good question. I think that anyone can do it. If there's a need, if you feel that there's a need, there's a demographic, anyone can do it. I would suggest.
Okay, so that's a first start. You knew that there was a need and you knew your demographic. Okay.
I knew there was a need. I knew my demographic, and I knew through the girls who I was teaching that they would be my audience.
Okay. So people knew you.
Yes,
people knew you. You had a name. Okay. So you weren't coming, it's not like you popped up in Toronto from nowhere. People knew you, people trusted you, and you already had an audience.
I did. I already had an audience.
Okay. And you ran it by them.
Yes. And if you're filling a niche, you're feeling a need, the first thing you need to know is, am I filling a need? Which need am I filling, right? If there's 100 stores just like you who are doing it, then maybe you should go into, a specific
beanies,
niche, right? Yeah. Beanies, purses,
sure. Great.
Swim dresses. For me, I knew there was a need. So that's number one. I always would suggest, only based on my own experience, to start small. If you want to know hard numbers, 7 years ago, I started with $5,000 of my own.
Wow.
And I then later borrowed $5,000 from a friend of mine, not even a close friend. I was like, hey, would you lend me $5,000 for a month? What I did is I decided the first thing we're going to do to get people in was I was going to make this little mini mall where I invited other vendors in Toronto. And I think I'm going to talk about networking soon because I think that's a huge part of the success of a business. But just put that on the back burner for a second. I invited other Toronto small businesses to come to like an auditorium with me, the school auditorium. And someone's going to sell wigs, someone's going to sell jewelry, someone's going to sell shells, someone's going to sell makeup, and I would be the clothing vendor.
And this was before you opened up officially. This was your intro.
This was my intro. This was my grand opening.
Your grand opening. Okay.
Thank God. Like, I really had this like collaborative, come in with a boom kind of idea. And once people knew me from this, and I advertised, advertising is so important. I advertised.
How did that event go?
That event was incredible. I made back all my money that I needed to pay back my friend, like in the first 2 hours. And
can't get better than that.
Yeah. Obviously I didn't sell everything in one night. It was hype. First of all, when you get a lot of other people involved who's equally as invested as you, you're all invested. There's this like group energy effort, which was an incredible way to start. First of all, it helped me to become friends with the other small businesses in Toronto. Know that I'm your friend. I'm not your competition.
And it was other clothing vendors, or
it was at that time the other clothing vendor was mostly like basics and shells, and I was going beyond that. But now they're just as like widespread as I am in the clothing business. And we started out, that's how we became friends. And I find that when you have that like, collaboration, friendly demeanor of we're all doing this together, it was really a success. There was enough advertising. Plus, as I said, I was still a school teacher at that time. I didn't leave right away. I got confidence from that because when I saw how many people showed up to that event and how it was just so simple to make back your money, especially I did start small, which I'm going to reiterate. Right. It just propelled me to do more. And then also when people came, they're like, oh, so you have this, which I didn't have. I was like, oh, I'll order that. And I was to be extremely open, not to only rely on your own knowledge, but the needs of the people around you. And I took it in and I went with it right away.
So how long until you were fully profitable, like without having to reinvest capital?
You always have to reinvest.
Right. But I'm saying until you see money on top of that reinvestment.
So in fashion, we go by seasons, right? There's like spring season, summer season, fall season, winter season. So it took me like a full year, which is about basically 2 seasons, which is like spring, summer, fall, winter, to see that like I was getting like money that I could actually put away for myself. But I was a teacher at the time, so I was getting a modest income anyway. And I was married and my husband was making an income. Keep in mind, as long as like I didn't have to dip into his money, like for him, he was like, if this is a hobby and it's keeping you busy and like whatever, he didn't ever think that it would turn into what it is today, And so I had the luxury to wait. Now, until I made real money, I would say it took 3 years. It took 3 full years until I made real money where I could really support myself fully and, have extra money. And, the truth is unless you have a really, really, really good bookkeeper working for you, it's very hard to know how much money you're making because there's always a cash flow. You're buying, you're selling, you're buying, you're selling, and you're selling it for more than you're buying, obviously, because you want to make some money. So thank God there's always a cash flow, especially in a business where there's the supply and the demand going on. So it's hard to know. It took me, I would say, I'm embarrassed to say, but it took me at least 5 years to even figure out if I was making money because I had a constant flow. So I was like, okay, I'll take what I need and whatever else I don't need, I'm just going to put right back in. It took me the end of my 5th year. So going into my 6th year to finally get a bookkeeper and be like, hey, how much money am I actually making a year? Until I actually looked at the hard numbers and looked. But I was making money. I obviously wasn't only doing it as Haz said.
No, yeah, listen, I totally get that because I know other stores and their stories and what it took for them to actually come away with a profit, meaning they were, like you said, they had cash flow, they were buying and selling, but then they had a $300,000 loss, right?
Yeah.
Because they had an inventory problem, right? So you're right. It takes a lot to figure that out. And so don't be embarrassed. I get it.
Yeah. And there's also the muzzle, right? Like it was muzzle that I had the audience, that people trusted me, and that I had the intuition and enough care and enough commitment to really get the right things for the people who needed it. Like it's also muzzle,
And I also love how you took how you really saw how important it was to involve the whole community, to get the other vendors involved. I think that also is not common necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to talk about the networking. Some of the ways that I find the more success you have is especially with women entrepreneurs, when they see other women who are successful, it could get competitive, right? Like you want to be successful and it's possible to be worried that if they're successful, it'll take away from my success. And what I realized was when eventually my sister joined me and we grew the business by leaps and bounds, when we went to, let's say, our buying shows or just on social media, connecting with other women, when we collaborated with them, when we included them with us, and when we got together with other women, the power of it doubled and tripled because everybody gained from it. And it was really a wonderful thing that I learned of the opposite of competition, the collaboration and the networking and, just everybody working together and we all gain from it. It really, really helps the business thrive.
Can you go into details of exactly what you mean? What do you mean collaborate? What do you mean network? Spell it out. What does that look like?
Also, how often, right? How often are you posting on social media for you to stay relevant?
Okay. So I think there's two different things here that we're talking about. There's the social media aspect and the publicity, and then there's also the collaboration, and they're two different things. We can touch on both if you'd like. The way I network, first of all, I need to network because before my sister and I this past season started producing our own clothing.
What's the name of the brand?
It's called Edith by Fringe after my grandmother.
Oh, that's great. I love
Edith
that.
by Fringe, yeah. Or Fringe label. That's our original label that we started with. Yeah, we started making our own label and we named our first formal one after my grandmother who was she was a fashionista. She sewed. Maybe we get it from her. Yes. So, but before we started our label, we relied on other companies to buy from. And we relied on whatever they were making. That's what we were providing. And so we had to stay in touch with them and we had to work with them. And also we gave our suggestions, we gave our feedback in a respectful way, right? There's many, many styles that don't work, right? And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason why they do work, or it's the fits, it's the trend, right? So we're always in touch with them. And the level at which you have respect and understanding and compassion for the success, the wins and the failures, that's how successful you'll be in the future at working with them, right? Because it's a relationship. And so the way you network is, first of all, just by buying with them and being in touch with them through email or through WhatsApp. But there's also a whole social media platform where you other people advertise and you see that that's taking off. And so you reach out to them and then you go to shows and you meet them at the shows and you talk to them and you get feedback from them and you trust them because they're like, listen, this is going to go. And you got to trust them and you learn who to trust and who not to, whose styles you like, who you don't. So you're constantly in touch with other people in the market. And there's a lot of other women in the market who you're dealing with on it all the time.
When you're talking about networking, so are you referring to with vendors or with other people like you, like store owners?
So both. Firstly, I was mostly talking about the vendors who I'm buying from, but then there's also let's say collaborations that you make, which I find important. Like the last one I made actually was a while ago. Oh, no, I collaborate all the time with tablecloths, right? Like around Yenta, people want tablecloths and clothing. Or once I did it with a fashion consultant, Mushka Zolti. She came to our house and she spoke about color cards and, seasons. And we did an event together. And these things, you don't necessarily do them for the money. I mean, although it does bring people in, but you're doing it to collaborate and to educate and to bring people together. And many times I find that it just multiplies things. Like from there, other people want to work with you. And even if, then the jewelry reaches out to you and someone else works out to you. And it's all just a ripple effect of working together with other people.
Do you have a LinkedIn profile? Are you getting the most out of it? Check out Share Media, the LinkedIn management service for CEOs of publicly traded companies and key industry leaders. Share Media offers customized strategies for LinkedIn success, enhanced professional presence, and effective engagement with your target audience. Transform your LinkedIn profile into a powerful tool for growth and visibility with Share Media. Ready to take your LinkedIn to the next level? Visit sharemedia.co today. And you mentioned shows. Is there just those two main shows that you go to in New York? Like twice a year? Is that it? Or is there more?
Yeah. There are more. There's the Javits Center, which is not specific to Jewish. There's one in LA. There's one in Las Vegas. I mean, you could go to China to the shows. There's countless shows you can go to. The ones that I find are the most successful for us to go to are just the firm shows that have other people just like me who are making it and in the same demographic. And those are the ones I find the most successful to go to. Although I am planning to open up and expand and try other things because, the more you expand, the more opportunities you have.
How did you find out about those shows? Like the manufacturers told you, the vendors told you, hey, we're doing a show, come check it out?
Yeah.
That's how you found out? Very cool. And with regards to constant engagement, how often do you have to post?
The more you post, the better it is.
Uh-huh.
What do you mean the better?
Okay, so that part is my sister Shira. Well, during COVID, to make a long story very short, during COVID, Shira was not in the clothing business at all. She was in the medical business, and her business went kaput, and she drove over into Canada and lived with me and my girls. And she was like, "Okay, Tova, let's." It was COVID, we couldn't really be open in the way we could naturally be open before. She's like, we're going to go on social media and we're going to kill it as sisters. And I didn't know much about it. I knew that, I was on Instagram from the beginning, but she really took it to the next level. She has the charm. She has the expertise. The dance moves. Absolutely.
I love it.
And the charm. Yeah. And during COVID, we doubled, and it was just so unlikely because most people, suffered, and we suffered in certain areas, but we doubled in other areas. And we realized the power of social media. So the more you show up on social media, the more you showcase what you have, the more you show who you are, and the more personable you are, the more people want to come to you, even just to hang out, right? They trust you. They want to be besides showcasing what you have, they want to be in the know, like you are. They want to be trendy. They want to be part of your group. They want to be just part of your club. And it's a lot of fun. And I find a lot of enjoyment out of that, just our little community that we have.
You're talking about your customers.
Yeah. Customers online and in store. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And finding good employees. What's that like?
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah.
I would say that's the toughest part.
Okay, let's start. If we could just rewind that. Now it's Sunday, 2 p.m. Is your store open? Who's there running it? And what is the day? What does your day look like? Do you have employees? Do you not have employees? Take us through your typical day. How much of it is in store? How much of it is dealing with vendors? How much of it is dealing with accountants? How much of it is dealing with, back end? How much of it is dealing with customers?
Okay, so the first thing I have to tell you is when you own your own business, it's 24 hours. I think anyone who owns their own business knows that. It's always on your head and it's always on your shoulders. I very much rely on my employees. We're a community, we're a group. It is so hard, and it's also muzzle when everything aligns and you find the right employees. And it's hard to find. I have to say right now, I'm very grateful. I have great employees. Right now, the store is open. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's busy. It's before camp. It's busy season. And I have two wonderful employees who really just fell into my lap, who are running my store, and I'm grateful for them.
What makes a wonderful employee for you, for your store, for everything?
So firstly, they have to fill in the gap that you're not good at. Like, you don't want a replica of you, because if you had a replica of you, then you wouldn't need them. Or it's just, it would be nice because, then maybe we could double our power. But you want someone who could really fill in the gaps and offset the things that you need. So for example, I'm a very big picture person. I need someone in store who could pay attention to details, who's organized, who, could zone into the details of what my customer needs. A lot of people don't want to be employed. Like they want to work for themselves, especially since COVID. Like, it's easy to work for yourself. It's very lucrative to work for yourself, but it's hard work to work for yourself, right? But finding that employee and working with them with their strengths, like seeing their strengths and valuing their strengths and letting them do the things that they're good at is a very important factor. So when I know that, like, I don't always get to enjoy the stuff that I do, right? So a lot of times I'll try to look for employees for the things that I don't love to do. But that doesn't always work out. Sometimes people are like saleswomen, for example, they come and they go, right? Because it's not the highest paying job, but it's a lot of times really good for, let's say, young mothers who don't want to work very hard, long hours. They can make their own hours. They get their hourly pay. They come home with something, extra cash. They can pay for their cleaning lady. They can pay for their extra food. They can pay for their extracurricular activities for their kids. It's great.
And they get that social aspect of being
They do,
and
they love it, and they love it. But they come and they go because they get pregnant, or they have to find a better paying job, or their finances change, or right. So I found that I just hired two women in their 60s and 70s, believe it or not, and they have empty nest syndrome, and they're really good at what they do, and they have experience in the fashion world. One of them had a little store in her basement for a while. She knows exactly what to do. Another one of them worked in Holt, Renfrew, which is like the Canadian Bloomingdale's, for 27 years. And she just retired, and she's bored and she wants to do something with her expertise. And the women love her. They remember her from Holt, Renfrew. They love her expertise, and she would literally do it for free.
From Holt, Renfrew to Fringe. I love that. I love
that. Oh, that is so good.
Oh, yeah. By the way, I miss Holt, Renfrew. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, totally. Oh, my gosh. It's such a, like, I don't know. It's so Toronto.
It's a vibe,
right?
It's such a Toronto vibe. Yeah. And many people recognize her, and it's great, right? But you have to get lucky with employees. Like, these employees it doesn't look like they're going to leave so soon. And I was very lucky, the younger mothers. I have one right now who works during the week. I love her. We're friends. She is so organized. She whips my store into shape. She makes it beautiful. She is incredible. But she can come, she can go. And you always have to know, like, first of all, not to take it personally when when things aren't working out. And also you have to know that there have been in between times when my employees left, let's say for better jobs or different jobs or whatever. And it was really, really hard on me because suddenly I had to do everything, right? There's those time periods, those lapses where I have to be in store and do all the work and be a mother, right? Like, it was really tough, but continuing to create an environment where people want to be there is helpful.
And customers, you find, are loyal, right? Like, if you're there, you're showing up. Like, how do you build that loyal base? I know there's a real need in Toronto, but
I would say listening. You have to do a lot of listening to what they want, listening to what they need, trying to get what they need, and also not being ridiculous. Like, we put in policies to protect ourselves, and it's important to keep to them, but also knowing when you could bend on them knowing when it makes sense that like, okay, this time making exceptions for the people who that it makes sense to and that they're not trying to take advantage, but it really makes sense.
Right, because the return policy is a major pain point, I would say, for a lot of people in the From community. Like, you buy something from a From store, you can't return it. Like, it's like
We have a
24
return
hours.
policy.
No,
Yeah.
but do you know what I'm saying, right? Like, is that what you're talking about? That's what you're referring to?
Yeah, returns, or like if something like didn't wash well, right? It's not our fault. We're just in between. Like the people made it, but we'll take it back. We'll go back to the company. Sometimes we will get our money back. Sometimes we won't get our money back. It's a risk. I actually once spoke to somebody, like, let's say in the States, the gallery. I was speaking to them about this issue of like, well, these people who come back and the material ran, or, you know, it's damaged. Like, what do you do? And she taught me something very good. She said, don't sweat the small stuff because then they'll come back. And it's true. I find if you don't sweat the small stuff, you're forgiving, you're compassionate. And even when you do have to set it, you do it in a way that's kind, then they'll come back. And a lot of times I have to work on my customer service, getting back to people, you know, answering all the messages I get. And Shira, to answer your question, my day sometimes from morning to night is like this. I wake up, there's emails, right? Emails from vendors, they want payments, reorders, emails from customers. They want to know if we have certain things in stock. When are we ordering? Are we getting it? You know, it's creating shipping labels, you know, all the back end things, putting 3 things in our inventory. And then there's the fun stuff of being out.
So in terms of the back end stuff, like do you have a workflow system for that? Are you on top of that? Do you have employees on top of that? Is it whoever catches it? How do you break it down? And did that change, you know, over time?
It evolved over time. First of all, the one thing I have to say is systems are very important. When you have systems and they flow, you don't have to be constantly worrying about it. It's a system. So I found in the beginning I was doing all of it. And when I'm able to find an employee who I trust and who's efficient in putting in inventory and unpacking it properly, and it's a team, when it's off my head, like the small, minute details of stuff, when I can focus on the big picture stuff, I work the best. So right now, thank God, like I have somebody who, when I have a shipment coming in, I email her the invoice. She puts it in my system. When it comes, we have a team who unpacks. Like, we have it down pat, and systems are important. I have a point of sale, right? An inventory. A point of sale is like a system that carries all my inventory. It like shows when things are low. You know, it shows our sales, right? So it's important. Every retail store needs a point of sale, like an inventory tracker.
How did you decide which system to go with? Like, how did you choose it, and how'd you hear about it?
So actually, I have yet to learn more about it because I'm still using the same system I used when I started, which is Square, which is basically like the reason why I did it when I started is because I had this little swiper that you could swipe on your phone. Like, you stick it in your iPhone, you swipe, and you have someone's credit card, and it was free. You didn't have to pay for it monthly, but I have to pay a percentage to it. And I know that I can get a better, cheaper, you know, system. You know, my sister in Florida, in her Florida store, has Shopify. Like, I know that like there's other systems that would be better, and I have a hard time going away from Square because for 7 years I know how to use it. I know how to use their point of sale. I know how to put things in, and it is more expensive than other companies
Software
and
platforms,
software. And I can grow in that. Yeah. But this is what works for me right now.
Okay, so you wake up and your inbox is full. You have messages, you have emails. Who sorts through all of that? How does it work?
So I do, because I find that part of the, like, being on the pulse of the business is knowing what's going on all the time. And it could be that I could work on delegating it. Like, I have a secretary, and some of the vendors wish I had a secretary, right? Because by the time I get back to them, you know, it's like 2 days later or whatever. And they always ask, like, get a secretary. And I could. The thing is, like, when I do it myself, I know when things are coming in, what needs to be reordered, what's like, I could put my finger on the pulse. If I had someone else who I tried a few times to like have someone else answer my emails or whatever, it's double the work because I'm paying them to do it. Plus they're asking me my opinion on everything and how to do everything. So I think that delegation is important, and knowing where you could delegate is important. I still have yet to work on my delegation, but for some things I can, and for some things I can't, you know? So I'm sorting through the emails. It's between customer service emails, it's from vendors, it's from, you know, bills, it's from shipping companies. And then from there, I think I just deal with whatever comes. Not everybody does that, but you're interviewing me. So this is the way I do it. I just deal with whatever comes. And with mentors who I have who have, you know, 3 or 4 stores, they've created like teams for everything. There's a team for production. There's a team for customer service. There's a team there's a secretary, there's a team. And I would suggest that those teams are very important when growing, and growing your team is equally important.
And with that in mind, like, do you think of expanding in Toronto, getting a storefront, getting out of the basement, or opening up more stores?
So I dabbled in it a little bit. Right now I'm a single mother. So having it in my basement, and I expanded my basement, by the way, many times. And now it's like the entire bottom floor. It's beautiful and it's very boutiquey and it's homey. People feel comfortable in it. It works for me. But yes, I think of expanding all the time. I speak to other people who are in storefronts who, my sister has a storefront in Florida, and I speak to her about the pluses and minuses. There's pluses, there's minuses. And I think about it, maybe, I think about it like when my kids are older. I think about it. I opened up a second store in Toronto in Thornhill, and that was a success. People came, like people needed it. It filled a need. I closed it down for a few reasons, mainly because the space I was using was unavailable anymore. I couldn't use it anymore, but I learned a lot from that, like the expanding part. Like if you're expanding, the key thing is you need enough support to be able to run 2 stores. You need a whole other staff for it. Like you need enough support to run it that it goes smoothly.
So what would you say are the easiest things for you to delegate? Because so far we're hearing lots of things that you don't feel comfortable delegating with.
The easiest things for me to delegate so far is, first of all, having like trendy and like friendly and competent, organized women on the floor. I feel like there's a lot of people who love fashion, who love to talk to the customers, and who can, help you on the floor. I think it's, even though they come and go, I think that's the easiest thing for me personally to delegate, even though I love being on the floor and it's one of my favorite parts.
Do you see your sales different when you're on the floor and when you're not on the floor?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I try to be there when I can.
That must be really hard.
So it's hard and it's easy, because when you see that someone loves it, right? When someone loves it as much as you do, and you see that they're talented and they have a style, they could, let's say like I have these women who I hired, who I just said are in their 60s, they help all the older women. They have patients. They could sit there with them. Or there's this other woman who I have who's a young mother like me. She helps them. So in a way, it's easy when I see their success. But also, I want to be there with it. Another thing that's easy for me to delegate is accounting and bookkeeping, right? That was never my thing. I hired someone very soon after, for me, soon was 2 years. 2 years into that, I hired someone to do my bookkeeping, my accounting, and that was easy to, delegate, because that's not something I'm good at. And I need to be delegating more, for sure.
How do you show employee appreciation? Right? That's a big one, right? Like,
it is a big one, for sure. First of all, constantly just expressing your appreciation is something important. Another thing that I do is I give an employee discount, which they love, because everybody loves clothing.
I remember that girl. She was just buying clothes with all the money.
Oh my God.
Do you remember that? Oh,
yes.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's a huge perk for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sometimes we allow it. Most of the time we don't.
It's worth it to just go work at Fringe for that employee discount.
Oh my gosh. Totally. The employee discount is incredible. Around Jam and Tovim, we try to give extra bonuses here and there, having a staff appreciation. We get together, have meetings. Again, it's something that can always be worked on. I hear of these incredible companies like Lululemon, or these having these appreciation days, or trainings, or retreats that they go on. And I aspire to be like that one day. I would love to take everyone on a retreat, or have a day where I take them on a boat, and they're getting up in this world.
And and the clothing that you're producing, are you going to sell them in stores here? Are you going to ship out your stuff that you're manufacturing?
This is a very good question. And we just started this past season as our first season. It is a goal of mine. When I see other companies doing it, people are younger than me, less experienced than me, and they're able to do it. I'm like, if they can pull it off, I can pull it off. It's definitely a goal of mine.
Could you talk us through the process of, design, finding the manufacturers, where are things being manufactured, how are you communicating with them, and then where are the products and how are they getting to you?
Okay. So a lot of this is I've been wanting to produce for a while.
I remember you did start a long time ago. You had a label.
Yeah, I had a label. I had a skirt and many companies, many designers who you buy from, they're like, oh, we'll make your own label. We'll make your own label. It's not always worth it to do it with someone else. And sometimes it is. but I've always wanted to do it.
What do you mean designer? Vendors that you buy from?
Vendors that I buy from, they'll make me my own label. And I haven't found what they offer to be yet. Something that I was interested in. Right, that just sounds
like we'll charge you more to put in your tag.
Exactly.
Or just buy it with our tag in it.
Or you have to do like an enormous amount of quantities, which I didn't have at that time. Now I have more buying power because we have 2 stores, one in Florida and one in Toronto. So our buying power definitely went up. And it helps.
And does that help for, buying from the vendors? You get do you get
a better deal?
Not usually. No, not usually. For a long time, okay. I wanted to produce because for me, one of my talents is that I'm able to see what people need and then just like zone in and fill in the gaps of what people need. Like I could get on the train pretty fast and I'm fast about it.
What do you mean people? You're saying your customers?
My customers, what they need. So, or what's missing in the market, right? So if I see like, okay, they like this black skirt, they like that black skirt, but this is missing, this is wrong, this is missing. I can make that perfect black skirt that people want. And there's a lot of black skirts on the market. There's a ton.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not perfect, or it's perfect, but it's very expensive by the time it gets to Canada.
And you can never have enough black skirts anyway.
That's right. And it's not, and it's, and by the time it gets to Canada, it's extremely expensive. And I feel bad. I have compassion for my customers who have to pay double the price just to sell it in Canada. So it started from, I think, the right place. Like when you're doing something from the right place, like you're doing it out of like, you want something for the greater good. I think that really helps things be successful. My want to create affordable clothing that people need and is missing was so huge, and it overpowered, the want to make money, which of course we want to make money. We want to support ourselves, or the want to be famous, or the want to be, to be successful or to make the right thing. Like more than anything, I wanted to have for them to have the right thing for the right price that they can just buy and rely on again and again. And so years ago, I started with a black skirt.
Did that come from, just seeing people come to your store and not being able to afford what they wanted to buy? And like, where did this?
Yeah, it came from people coming in and like, they have 6 girls that they have to dress. And, after just buying one outfit for everybody, it's like over $1,000. And they're like, a lot of them are in chinuch and they can't afford it. And it happens to be in Toronto. There's incredible support for people like this. There's tons of programs that they could go on, and there's just people who donate money or give gift cards here and there. It's amazing. Toronto's an incredibly giving and generous city. But besides that, just for someone's dignity to come in and to be able to afford clothing is important for me. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's going up and up and up, the dollar is getting, more and more expensive, and the prices are going up, shipping from overseas is going up. Everything is going up in leaps and bounds. And I see people struggling, and I feel bad. And for myself too, I go to other stores and like things are just really, pricey, and, the kids want to be like their friends, and they need, for a 3-day yontif, they need 3 to 6 outfits for night and day, and you can't wash it. And I want to be able to provide what they need at the right price. So years ago,
what was the process?
Years ago, I had somebody who I was buying great skirts from, but I wanted to make it my own. So I started out from that. I said, hey, can you make me this skirt with this label? And I'll take a lot of them, right? When you buy a lot of them, they're willing to do it for you. And it worked for many years. I was able to do a private label with him, and he made it for me. But then, the styles changed and demographic changed, and I saw other people being able to buy things overseas. So as I said, for a long time I want to do it, but everything has to align. You have to be in the right place, and ready to be able to invest in it. And you have to God is in charge, and he's the one at the right time. He knows when you're ready for it. And the people came to me. I had people who reached out to us on Instagram when we got big on Instagram, my sister and I, who we had factories who messaged us and said, hey, we make clothing for, other religious, companies, and we'd be willing to do it for you. They reached out to me. It was incredible. That's how I started.
Wow.
That's great.
And I said, okay, and I had a few things that I had in mind that were successful and that I wanted to make, just a little bit differently. The fit. Right? The fit's important. The fabric's important. Sometimes I'm like, wow, this is an amazing, let's say dress, but the fabric is terrible. I want to make it in a better fabric. Or this is amazing fabric and amazing dress, but the fit is terrible, right? So many things have to come together for it to work. and, or my community wanted it, but without back pockets, or, they wanted it a few inches longer. Like you need to sometimes make custom. And so they offered, and we started out with like a small amount, which is like 50 pieces. Now come, 50 pieces for each style, which is still a lot. And then they go up to 100, and between me and my sister.
And you design them, you send them the prints. How does it work?
Okay. So there are like true designers and pattern makers who you can send it to. They're like the middle people who you hire. You show them what you want. Let's say a lot of times you have samples of things that you want, but you show them like, I want this, but with these variations. So that's the first and most easiest way to do it. You're not starting from scratch. You have something on the market that you want, but it's too expensive and that you don't like the fit and fabric. So you take something that's already there and you make variations for it. That's like the first way you can do it. It's not, the next way you can do it is start from scratch. Like, get a pattern, be like, listen, I would love a kimono dress. I think a kimono dress is really cool. So you start like, searching up patterns for a kimono dress, and you look for fabrics that you like, and you can do it from scratch. And there's trial and error. They make a pattern for you. You don't like it. They make it again, another sample for you. You like it, but you want to tweak it. And it's a process. That's the second way of doing it. And a third way of doing it is a lot of these manufacturers are already so high end, and they have such cutting edge technology that you could even just show them a picture of something that you want. And they can, with their technology and with their machinery, they can create replicas, and they can do it for you. And many times it's a back and forth. Again, like they send it to you, you tweak it.
When you say they send it to you, they send you a sample, like a hard sample, or And how long does a process like that take?
It can take up to 6 months sometimes. 3 to 6 months, I would say. 3 months being this, because it's overseas. And a big thing also is, like, now we're very lucky. We're in a generation where we can Zoom, where specifically with, let's say if you're we work with all different countries. There's Bangladesh, there's Indonesia, there's China. Specifically with China, there's like something called WeChat, which is what they use. So you download WeChat, you have to get approved for it. And then you talk with the Chinese vendors in the middle of the night. Sometimes we're up all night, my sister and I. And yeah, you're talking back and forth. And even after that, it's not foolproof. You think you made the perfect thing, and it just doesn't sell as well as you thought it would, right? So the main thing is when you know your customers, when you talk to them, when you see the trends of what they're buying, what they need, and the want is there, the motivation is there to fill their needs and to make what they want and what will sell. You work together, you make it, you create it, it's there, it sells. It's an incredible feeling.
And how do you know how to price it?
My personal ideology is price it as affordable as you can. That's what I want to do. There are some companies who want to be high end, and they want to make more money per item. For me, I want it to be as affordable as possible. So with my expenses, I go through the calculations of how I can make money, enough money that it's worth it for me, but the least I can do so that the customer can afford my clothing and can buy a lot of it. They could buy 3 skirts if they need it, 3 black skirts. They could buy 3 hoodie dresses. They can buy, 2 Shabbos outfits and not feel like they're breaking the bank. That's a success for me. And to know that I created something beautiful that they want and they need, there's no better feeling.
If a dress is priced at like $150, that's going to sell a lot more, right? Than something that's going to be $300, right?
Exactly.
Is that a point though? Like, is what do you feel is like the most people will spend on a dress that it's like worth it? Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's a good question. You have different personality types. I find that in Toronto, a lot of people love brands. I know this because people are like, do you have this brand? Do you have that brand? And a lot of times they'll pay the premium for the brand name. And being behind the scenes and knowing what it costs to create some of the stuff and how much these people are hiking it up. First of all, these people are experts, and I'm sure there's a lot of expenses in going into the specific fabrics that are incredible and the designing and everything. And I'm sure there's a lot of expenses that these designers have that I don't. So I'm not judging them, but I do know from the knowledge that I have is that they are pricing them at high end because they're a brand and they can. And some people love it, and some people want to spend a lot of money. They feel good. They feel like when they're spending the money, it's worth it. And for some of these brands, it is worth it because they perfected the fit or they have a specific style that nobody has. But many times there are those type of people who just want the brand name and they want to spend the money of the brand name. So I have that. I bring them in for that because for those customers who want it, I'm going to provide it. Me personally, I think that I would say most people just want an affordable dress that looks good, that fit is nice, the fabric's nice, it's on trend, then that's the best sell, you know? But specifically in Toronto, where there's like there's a division between the high class and the low class, and the higher class people, they will come back again and again and again for the designer things, and I will provide it for them. And many times I'm left with designer things and I put it on sale, but that's part of the game.
Part of the game. I love that. I mean, I feel like we can talk to Tova forever.
Forever. I will have so many more questions. I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
We'll have to do part 2. Maybe we'll bring back Shira. Okay.
Oh yeah. Guys can come on together.
Let me tell you, my sister Shira, she's great, and she has a lot to offer. And it was really nice just, talking to you about it. And if I helped anyone in any way, just understand the business more.
How could anyone reach out to you if they have any questions?
You could reach out. You could look out to me on social media, fringe.toronto. Or you can email me, look me up. I'm always open to, talk to people. Network is something I love most.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much, Tova.
Thanks so much, Tova.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.